Alright, so this is going to be my first vlog. So here I am, at the start of a new semester. In theory, the last semester as a graduate student, but, let's be honest. I will likely find myself sitting in a university classroom, once again, working on another degree, not merely to gain professional development points. Also in theory, this is my first semester, or part of a semester, where I will be a full-time teacher, responsible for the education of today's youth. I'm not at all excited. I'm not at all nervous. This week was an interesting one, as you might expect. Last week I was to have my student-teacher orientation with Peace Valley City Schools, but due to weather, that meeting was postponed until this week. And right away I learned perhaps the most important lesson of any educator in this area needs to know. Schedules are subject to the whims of the season. While I did not need to be at the orientation until Thursday, there was some paperwork I could take care of at a time, so Wednesday was my first day at Thomas Jackson Middle School. I have to be honest, I was more than a little nervous about the middle school experience. First and foremost, I recognized my middle school experience was most atypical in many regards, and I left middle school, or as we called it in Nebraska, junior high, almost 20 years ago. Secondly, I freely admit I have a greater familiarity and comfort working with high school teenagers. So I was walking into a school where I knew I'd be challenged in several ways. But as my wife was fond of saying, I might be surprised. And I was. Pleasantly. I met my supervising teacher, Mr. Longstreet. Mr. Longstreet has been teaching for nearly 30 years. Almost all of that time has been with 7th graders teaching civics. It so happens that his first 2 periods of the day are planning periods, one for individual planning and the other for team planning. The 7th grade teachers are divided into teams: language arts, aka English, mathematics, science, and social studies. And as you might expect on the first day, I was bombarded with names, which, sadly, I'm still trying to learn. But I found the faculty warm and inviting, and the students were better behaved in many respects than the high schoolers I had last semester. Mr. Longstreet and I chatted briefly as he gave me a tour of the building. And just as we were getting into some of the ins and outs of teaching, recording grades and attendance, we were interrupted. Apparently there was a miscommunication and a scheduled meeting for that morning to discuss a student's study habits. This meeting had been called at the behest of the student's mother and was the first in the process towards possibly developing an IEP for the student. Good experience on day one. Of course, I was largely clueless to the particulars of the student, but this was definitely something I had not experienced during the field internship in the fall. So, just goes to show, there's more to being an educator than lesson plans. The remainder of the day was devoted to class time. Mr. Longstreet teaches 4 classes, all of them civics. His last class of the day is a directed study time, where students are, as I understand it, given school time to read and earn points for their annual reading goals. It also is a time where students can seek out the help of other teachers and get tutoring or additional help on homework and or projects. By and large, Mr. Longstreet does not have a lot of homework or assignments, so it becomes a sort of study hall period. What intrigued me the most about this time, and something I had noticed all day, were the books students would be reading, or lugging around. I would say easily 1/5 of all the students had one of the Harry Potter books. Some of the other titles surprised me a little, not because they were not age appropriate, although I did see a couple that were, but because I just never thought about middle schoolers reading the various Rick Riordan books, of which I am a fan, BTW. So Thursday was orientation, so I missed most of Mr. Longstreet's planning periods, but I did get to sit in on the class itself. There's undoubtedly some issues and information we need to work through, especially when it comes to curriculum planning, but I'm impressed and even eager to start. Just a few brief and random comments before I finish the entry for the week. Mr. Longstreet uses the most impressive textbook I've seen for a class, at least on first glance. Hey, hang on. It's a Prentice Hall text, which is directly aligned with the Virginia SOLs. Flipping through the table of contents shows exactly where the text one can cover or uncover the material of the SOLs. Let's see if I can find an example. Here we go. So you can see up here it's the SOL, essential understandings, essential skills, essential knowledge, essential questions, etc., etc. And then over here on the other side are some pages for where you can find the stuff. It's really, really kind of cool. So I'm looking forward to digging into that and seeing a little bit more about it. Another couple things. Peace Valley Schools does not use either the Promethean board nor the smart boards, but something called Mimeo. It's not an actual board, it's kind of it's just a projector they project onto the actual whiteboard. Mr. Longstreet sometimes uses it, but I haven't seen it really used in the class. What I have seen and what I've learned online, I'm pretty impressed with. However, it's another device I need to learn. On Wednesday, Mr. Longstreet employed this wonderful teaching technique, which I fully plan to borrow from him. He purchased some whiteboards from Home Depot and then had them cut into 4x4 blocks. I guess about the size of the textbook, but an actual square. Each student received a little whiteboard, a whiteboard marker, and a sock, which they would use as an eraser. And throughout the class, he would ask the students a question. They'd write the answer on their board, and then they would have them hold up the answers, and he would walk around the classroom. This was a chance for him to monitor students' understanding of what he had just said, or assess their prior knowledge on something he was going to talk about. And if the student had an incorrect answer, he would say no. After he had checked everybody's answers, he would have the correct answered students hold up their cards to make sure that the students who didn't have it correctly could see it. He would also check for spelling and say, watch your spelling. So it was kind of interesting that he was doing more than just social studies. It's a simple thing. It seemed to work quite well. I only wish I had a board so I could participate. My last comment is about the image at the top of the blog. I think the hallmark of Mr. Longstreet's teaching style has to do with behavior management. He manages to provide a nice form of structure and discipline to their day. Students are not allowed into the classroom. Instead, he has them meet him outside, lined up, and has a ritual of sorts, whereby he releases them into the classroom, first the ladies, then the gentlemen. And he does something very similar at the end of the class to get them to gather their materials, and then releases the ladies and then the gentlemen. I'm not sure I could see myself being that rigid. I cannot deny the appeal I see in the structure. And it's obvious that the students respond to that form and format and respect him as a teacher. So, as I said, there's more to being an educator than lesson plans. And behavior management is one of those things. So that was my experience, my first week of school.